Hi, we're back again now, and we're getting close to the end of the book. We've really put in a lot of time, so now it's kind of important to get the best we can out of the remaining chapters. We are currently on chapter 30 of 34. So we put 30 or 29 chapters in, and we only have these last few left to go. And this one's called On Parole. Now, parole, when you think of the word parole, you think of somebody who was in jail, but now they're kind of just being on a system where they have to go and check in and things like that. So there's a relation to that in this particular chapter. As we know, Jim is kind of now a prisoner of the pirates. So let's see what happens, okay? I was wakened. Indeed, we were all wakened, for I could see even the sentinel shake himself together from where he had fallen against the doorpost, by a clear, hearty voice hailing us from the margin of the wood. "Blockhouse, ahoy!" it cried. "Here's the doctor." And the doctor it was. Although I was glad to hear the sound, yet my gladness was not without admixture. I remembered with confusion my insubordinate and stealthy conduct, and when I saw where it had brought me, among what companions and surrounded by what dangers, I felt ashamed to look him in the face. I want to stop early on today and take a look at this paragraph. It is full of difficult text, difficult words that we need to stop and pay attention to. Some of them we can figure out probably without very much help, but others are harder, and sometimes this is the moment when you stop and you write it down and maybe even you look it up. Reading is not supposed to be like valuable reading of things that you do not know is not supposed to be so easy that you know all of the words. Really good reading is when you're actually learning new things as you read. Okay, so in this particular paragraph, the first word that is kind of tricky is admixture. Okay, so he's talking about hearing the sound of the doctor's voice, and he's glad, but not without admixture. Something add to the mix. Think of it that way, mixed in with everything. He doesn't just feel glad to hear the doctor's voice, but here it goes into the next one, which is kind of a tough sentence. It says, "I remembered with confusion my insubordinate and stealthy conduct." Now, you may not know what insubordinate is, and more likely to know what stealthy conduct is. Insubordinate means that you went against the orders of your superior. So if you're insubordinate, you didn't do what you were told. Okay, and that's true of him. And he was stealthy. He snuck away. Okay, and he saw where it brought him, among what companions and surrounded by what dangers. So he ended up with the pirates, surrounded by danger, perhaps on the verge of being killed because of what he did. So though he's glad to hear the doctor's voice, he remembers all the other terrible things, both that he did and the danger that he is in. And he felt ashamed to look in the doctor's face. It is a difficult paragraph, but an important one, because the emotions that Jim is going through right now are really, really important and kind of tough. He is a kid, but he has been through things that most kids will have never been through and should never have been through: death and loss and danger and violence. And now one friend is come back into his time, in his world, and he's in the middle of enemies, and it's an emotional moment for Jim. All right, let's continue. "He must have risen in the dark, for the day had hardly come, and when I ran to the loophole and looked out, I saw him standing, like Silver once before, up to the mid-leg in creeping vapor." Once again, vapor is like fog, okay? "You, doctor, top of the morning to you, sir," cried Silver, broad awake and beaming with good nature in a moment. "Bright and early to be sure, and it's the early bird, as the saying goes, that gets the rations. George, shake up your timbers, son, and help Dr. Livesey over the ship's side. All a doing well? Your patience was all well and a merry." So he pattered on, standing on the hilltop with his crutch under his elbow and one hand upon the side of the log house, quite the old John in voice, manner, and expression. "We've quite a surprise for you, too, sir," he continued. "We've a little stranger here, he. A new boarder and lodger, sir, and looking fit and taut as a fiddle. Slept like a supercargo, he did, right alongside of John. Stem to stem we was all night." Dr. Livesey was by this time across the stockade, that's the fence, and pretty near the cook, and I could hear the alteration in his voice as he said, "Not Jim." "The very same Jim as ever was," said Silver. The doctor stopped outright, although he did not speak, and it was some seconds before he seemed able to move on. Well, well, he said at last, duty first and pleasure afterwards, as you might have said yourself, Silver. Let us overhaul these patients of yours. A moment afterwards, he had entered the blockhouse and, with one grim nod to me, proceeded with his work among the sick. He seemed under no apprehension, though he must have known that his life, among these treacherous demons, depended on a hair, and he rattled on to his patients as if he were paying an ordinary professional visit in a quiet English family. His manner, I suppose, reacted on the men, for they behaved to him as if nothing had occurred, as if he were still ship's doctor and they still faithful hands before the mast. Okay, so he comes in and he acts like he's just a regular doctor and they're just regular patients, even though they're pirates and they would like to kill him. Okay, and they act like that's true as well. So they act like normal patients. You're doing well, my friend, he said to the fellow with the bandaged head. And if ever any person had a close shave, it was you. Your head must be as hard as iron. Well, George, how goes it? You're a pretty color, certainly. Why, your liver, man, is upside down. Did you take that medicine? Did he take that medicine, men? Aye, aye, sir, he took it, sure enough, returned Morgan. Because you see, since I am mutineer's doctor, or prison doctor, as I prefer to call it, says Dr. Livesey in his pleasantest way, I make it a point of honor not to lose a man for King George, God bless him, and the gallows. Okay, so what he just said there to them is like, he doesn't want any of them to die because he wants to save them for King George, the king at the time in England, and the gallows. Like, so they could be fully prosecuted and punished and even killed. He wants to make sure they all live. That's pretty twisted, doctor. The rogues looked at each other, but swallowed the home thrust in silence. So they just took it. Dick don't feel well, sir, said one. Don't he? Replied the doctor. Well, step up here, Dick, and let me see your tongue. No, I should be surprised if he did. The man's tongue is fit to frighten the French. Another fever. Ah, there, said Morgan. That comes of spoiling Bibles. That comes, as you call it, of being errant asses, retorted the doctor, and not having sense enough to know honest air from poison, and the dry land from a vile, pestiferous slough. I think it most probable, though of course it's only an opinion, that you'll all have the deuce to pay before you get that malaria out of your systems. Camp in a bog, would you? Silver, I'm surprised at you. You're less of a fool than many, take you all around, but you don't appear to me to have the rudiments of a notion of the rules of health. Okay, so a lot going on in this paragraph too, but what the doctor is saying is that they had chosen to camp in a swamp, and now they're all getting malaria, which is something that is passed on by mosquitoes in swampy areas. Okay, and so he's saying, Silver, you should have known better. None of you know any better, you know. He also, at the very beginning, calls them errant asses. And errant is something that's gone astray, gone off from what it should have done. And the word ass is referring to, in this case, donkeys, using it to make fun of people because they don't have enough sense or they're stubborn or stupid about stuff. Okay, because a donkey can often be like, I don't want to, I'm not going to do what I'm supposed to do, that kind of thing. So that's why he's using it. So some of you might like laugh at that word because it's considered a naughty, bad word in our culture, but that's not what he's doing. He's not talking about body parts. He's talking about donkeys. You guys are just being dumb donkeys about this. Okay. All right. Well, he added after he had dosed them round and they had taken his prescriptions with really laughable humility, more like charity school children than blood-guilty mutineers and pirates. Well, that's done for today, and now I should wish to have a talk with that boy, please. And he nodded his head in my direction carelessly. George Marriott was at the door, spitting and spluttering over some bad-tasted medicine. But at the first word of the doctor's proposal, he swung round with a deep flush and cried, no, and swore. Silver struck the barrel with his open hand. Silence, he roared, and looked about him positively like a lion. Doctor, he went on in his usual tones, I was a-thinking of that, knowing as how you had a fancy for the boy. We're all humbly grateful for your kindness, and as you see, puts faith in you and takes the drugs down like that much grog. And I take it I've found a way as'll suit all. Hawkins, will you give me your word of honor as a young gentleman, for a young gentleman you are, although poor born, your word of honor not to slip your cable. I readily gave the pledge required. Then, doctor, said Silver, you just step outside of that stockade, and once you're there, I'll bring the boy down on the inside, and I reckon you can yarn through the spars. Good day to you, sir, and all our duties to the squire and Captain Smollett. The explosion of disapproval, which nothing but Silver's black looks had restrained, broke out immediately the doctor had left the house. Silver was roundly accused of playing double, of trying to make a separate piece for himself, of sacrificing the interests of his accomplices and victims, and, in one word, of the identical exact thing that he was doing. It seemed to me so obvious in this case that I could not imagine how he was to turn their anger. But he was twice the man the rest were, and his last night's victory had given him a huge preponderance on their minds. He called them all the fools and dolts you can imagine, said it was necessary I should talk to the doctor, fluttered the chart in their faces, asked them if they could afford to break the treaty the very day they were bound to treasure hunting. Okay. So what's happening here is they're mad because he's going to let the boy and the doctor talk. And they are like, thinking that's a stupid idea. And these guys are the enemies. And why would they do that? And John's wanting to let them talk because he wants the doctor and Jim kind of on his side. And the pirates are getting it. They're like, you're playing double here. And he's like, oh no, and I've got the map to find the treasure. Come on, guys, you're on my side. And somehow they are still with him on it. Okay, no, by thunder, he cried. It's us must break the treaty when the time comes. Until then, I'll gammon that doctor. If I have to aisle his boots with brandy. He's like, he's going to be nice to the doctor to the very end until they break it's time to break the treaty. Okay, because the doctor is pretty useful to them. He's helping them fight off their sickness. And then he bade them get the fire lit and stalked out upon his crutch with his hand on my shoulder, leaving them in a disarray and silenced by his volubility rather than convinced. Slow, lad, slow, he said. They might round upon us in a twinkle of an eye if we was seen to hurry. Very deliberately, then, did we advance across the sand to where the doctor awaited us on the other side of the stockade. And as soon as we were within easy speaking distance, Silver stopped. You'll make a note of this here also, doctor, says he, and the boy'll tell you how I saved his life, and were deposed for it, too, and you may lay to that. Doctor, when a man's steering as near the wind as me, playing chuck farthing with the last breath in his body like, you wouldn't think it too much, mayhap, to give him one good word. You'll please bear in mind it's not my life not only now, it's that boy's into the bargain. And you'll speak me fair, doctor, and give me a bit of hope to go on, for the sake of mercy. Silver was a changed man once he was out there and had his back to his friends and the blockhouse. His cheeks seemed to have fallen in. His voice trembled. Never was a soul more dead in earnest. Why, John, you're not afraid? Asked Dr. Livesey. Doctor, I'm no coward. No, not I, not so much. He snapped his fingers. If I was, I wouldn't say it. But I'll own up fairly I've the shakes upon me for the gallows. You're a good man and a true. I never seen a better man. And you'll not forget what I done good. Not any more than you'll forget the bad, I know. And I step aside, see here, and leave you and Jim alone. And you'll put that down for me too, for it's a long stretch as that. Okay. So John is telling the doctor, look, you got to put a good word in for me. I'm not just saving my life, I'm saving Jim's. All right? I know you're going to remember all the bad things I did, but I want you to remember the good things I did too. Because when it comes down to it, maybe you can save my life. He is scared. He's not one, like he says, he's not a coward. He's a pretty bold guy. But this is bad. He thinks this is getting bad. So saying, he stepped back a little way till he was out of earshot, and there sat down upon a tree stump and began to whistle, spinning round now and again upon his seat so as to command a sight, sometimes of me and the doctor, and sometimes of his unruly ruffians as they went to and fro in the sand between the fire, which they were busy rekindling, and the house from which they brought forth pork and bread to make the breakfast. So, Jim, said the doctor sadly, here you are. As you have brewed, so shall you drink, my boy. Heaven knows I cannot find it in my heart to blame you, but this much I will say, be it kind or unkind. When Captain Smollett was well, you dared not have gone off. And when he was ill and couldn't help it, by George, it was downright cowardly. I will own that here I began to weep. Doctor, I said, you might spare me. I have blamed myself enough. My life's forfeit anyway, and I should have been dead by now if Silver hadn't stood up for me. And, doctor, believe this, I can die, and I dare say I deserve it. What I fear is torture, if they come to torture me. Jim, the doctor interrupted, and his voice was quite changed. Jim, I can't have this. Whip over and we'll run for it. Doctor, said I passed my word. I know, he cried. We can't help that, Jim, now. I'll take it on my shoulders. Holus bolus, blame and shame, my boy, but stay here. I cannot let you jump. One jump and you're out, and we'll run for it like antelopes. No, I replied, you know right well you wouldn't do the thing yourself. Neither you nor squire nor captain, and no more will I. Silver trusted me. I passed my word, and back I go. But doctor, you did not let me finish. If they come to torture me, I might let slip a word of where the ship is. For I got the ship, part by luck and part by risking, and she lies in North Inlet on the southern beach, and just below high water, at half tide, she must be high and dry. The ship, exclaimed the doctor. Rapidly I described to him my adventures, and he heard me out in silence. There's a kind of fate in this, he observed when I had done. Every step it's you that saves our lives. And do you suppose by any chance that we are going to let you lose yours? That would be a poor return, my boy. You found out the plot. You found Ben Gunn, the best deed that ever you did, or will do, though you live to 90. Oh, by Jupiter, and talking of Ben Gunn, why, this is the mischief in person. Silver, he cried, Silver, I'll give you a piece of advice. He continued as the cook drew near again. Don't you be in any great hurry after that treasure. Why, sir, I do my possible, which that ain't, said Silver. I can only, asking your pardon, save my life and the boys by seeking for that treasure, and you may lay to that. Well, Silver, replied the doctor, if that is so, I'll go one step further. Look out for squalls when you find it. Sir, said Silver, as between man and man, that's too much and too little. What you're after, why you left the blockhouse, why you given me that chart. I don't know now, do I? And yet I done your bidding with my eyes shut, and never a word of hope. But no, this here's too much. If you won't tell me what you mean plain out, just say so, and I'll leave the helm. No, said the doctor musingly, I've no right to say more. It's not my secret, you see, Silver. I give you my word I'd tell it to you. But I'll go as far as with you as I dare go, and a step beyond, or I'll have my wig sorted by the captain, or I'm mistaken. And first, I'll give you a bit of hope. Silver, if we both get alive out of this wolf trap, I'll do my best to save you, short of perjury. Silver's face was radiant. You couldn't say more, I'm sure, sir, not if you was my mother, he cried. Well, that's my first concession, added the doctor. My second is a piece of advice. Keep the boy close beside you, and when you need help, hallo. I'm off to seek it for you, and if that itself will show you if I speak at random. Goodbye, Jim. And Dr. Livesey shook hands with me through the stockade, nodded to Silver, and set off at a brisk pace into the wood. Okay, this last bit, being dialogue, is very difficult. That's one of the things we struggle with in this book, is sometimes the regular text, when it's just like telling the story, is fine. But when it starts to be characters talking to characters in dialogue, it gets kind of tricky because of the different dialects and the types of words that they use. So let me back her up a little bit. First of all, Jim is like, he's sorry. When the doctor's like, that was bad what you did. It was cowardly what you did. You ran off when the captain was hurt. And Jim's like, I know, and I'm really sorry, and I probably deserve to die. But what I really am worried about is they're going to torture me. And if they torture me, and the doctor's like, dang, Jim, just jump over, we'll run. I can't leave you here. I mean, the doctor's talking to a kid, and he's like, oh no, I don't want you to be tortured either. Just get out, we'll run for it. And Jim's like, no, I gave my word. I'm not going to do it. You heard me give my word. I'm staying. Okay, you wouldn't turn on your word. I'm not going to turn on my word. Okay, that's a big growth for that kid. He's just a kid, and he's like, no, I'm not going to break my word. I'm going to stay. But here's why I don't want to be tortured. It's not because he fears being tortured, although I'm sure he does. It's because he doesn't want to give away where the ship is. So he tells the doctor where the ship is so that his friends can get it. All right? And so the doctor's like, at every turn, you're the one who's saving us, Jim. And then he calls Silver back over. And he tries to give Silver advice that might save him. He tells him that. He's like, look, don't be in a hurry to go get the treasure. And Silver's like, that is exactly what I have to do, is go find the treasure in order to save me and Jim. I can't do the impossible. That's what I have to do. And then the doctor's like, okay, be ready for squalls when you find it. Now, a squall is a term for a storm at sea. So he's like, there's going to be storms when you find it. Hint. Can't say anything more. Not my secret to tell. I'm just telling you, be careful and keep Jim close to you. And if you do, if we all get out of here alive, I'll put in a good word for you. And Silver's like, oh, yes. He really trusts the doctor. The doctor is a man of his word. And so even Silver's like, yes, if you will put a good word in for me, I know that I might have a shot. And so now he's got Silver like on his side, kind of, right? Because of that. Okay. And then that's the end of the chapter. Dr. Livesey shakes his hand and through the stockade, because the stockade, remember, is a palisade of logs, of tree trunks. You have to climb it to get in. There is no gate, but there are places between where you can stick a hand. You just can't squeeze between them. Okay, so imagine that. He shakes his hand, and that's the end of chapter 30. All right, we'll be back again with 31, and it's called The Treasure Hunt, Flint's Pointer. So they're going to go on, finally, on Treasure Island, the hunt for treasure. See you then.